Chris is a partner at Anthony Collins Solicitors, and he's been immersed in meditation since the age of 19, when he spent 2 years in a Benedictine monastery, and he's been leading regular lunchtime sessions and the Saturday morning sessions for us at Chaplaincy Plus since the beginning of 2019. And he's also the founder of the School of Contemplative Life. Chris, thank you so much for this opportunity to go deeper, renewing our perspectives as we find our path into 2021. I'm delighted to hand over to you to lead our session.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, it's really good to be with you. Everything that people have been going through with COVID was very much at the front of my mind when I was thinking about the topic for today a couple of months ago. And now, of course, the situation is much worse, much more serious. So I decided on the weekend that it might be a really good idea today to go back to a few of the key teaching and messages around the practice, and key messages and teachings we've been exploring on the weekly Saturday practice sessions. So bear with me, Saturday morningers. Aspects of the practice which really focus very directly on how the wisdom and healing of the practice helps us to respond to the needs and suffering of others, as well as to take care of ourselves. I really want that to come through very clearly today. Some of you know that, well, you'll have heard, my work brings me into contact with a lot of leaders in education and other organizations. And the regular conversations with them just continue to underline how much people are bearing, how tired people are, how worried people are, how much people are suffering and anxious. So I'm going to touch on some things that you may have heard me say before, but I hope you'll bear with me. It's always useful to return to some of these principles, to reset, to remind ourselves to return, to begin again, and to find some of the stability that comes from this return, this reminding. I'd like to begin by reading a short quotation which has acted as one of the guiding teachings for me over the last year, and use this to try and frame what I want to say. And it's from Martin Laird's latest book, which I'd encourage you to have a look at, called An Ocean of Light: Contemplation, Transformation, and Liberation. And Martin writes in there, "The mystery of God in Christ seeks to bring himself to others through us as food for the hungry, clothing for the naked, justice for the imprisoned, compassion for the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. Contemplation and the lifestyle leading to it and flowing from it asks but a single question: what does kindness look like at any given moment?" That's wonderful. All I'd add to that at the moment is that, of course, this question of kindness must also be kindness towards ourselves. As many of you know, I know there are some people here today who are very new to the practice and this tradition of prayer. Meditation in the Christian tradition is an ancient way of prayer, which means that it's supremely about relationship. You hear an enormous amount of talk in magazines, on the radio, elsewhere, about being present. Huge focus on being present. Well, of course, it's about being present. Not least of all because there isn't actually anywhere else than the present, even if our heads take us into realms which we like to imagine aren't. But certainly in all the major traditions of meditation, absolutely and underlined endlessly in the Christian tradition, being present is always about being present with and present for each other. In meditation, we cultivate loving attention. Loving attention. To bring this loving attention to our life, so we don't miss our appointment with life, but crucially, to our relationships. As we cultivate loving attention, we can't actually help doing that, unless I suppose we try very hard, because we are relational beings. We are within and through relationship in every sense. To paraphrase Rowan Williams, for most of us, to receive the gift of loving attention makes the world feel a little brighter, a little warmer. It enlarges the world. As he says, loving attention helps us to feel that the world is wonderful, that God is wonderful, that we might just be wonderful and lovable too. Many of you will have heard me say many times, and I have to warn you now, I probably won't stop saying this. As I say that, I'm reminded of a time when I was at the monastery and my primary teacher, Dom Sylvester Hudar, got up in front of an audience once and said he'd been saying largely the same thing for the last 30 years, and he had no intention of saying anything different, just trying to reorganize the words occasionally to make it easier on people's ears. Meditation in the Christian tradition is absolutely not about mastering techniques. And we'll touch on this a little later, that we are not actually leading in this anyway. It's not about mastering techniques. It is about relationship. And it's not about obtaining anything that is already here with us, within us. It's all about releasing everything that prevents us seeing, encountering what is here, and shining within all creation. And shining within and from all of us. It can sometimes strike people as a little curious, and especially if they're not familiar with it, possibly even a little bit odd, that we sit quietly in stillness. A CCTV camera wouldn't pick a great deal up. But it doesn't have to. Sitting still, sitting quietly, is the way we commit to being here, to allowing God make even the smallest, most ordinary aspects of our daily life more transparent to his life. Why? So we can share this loving light. Which is why some of you will have heard me liken holiness and the practice to polishing a window, just to let the light flow through into our lives, through our life, and on into the lives of those around us. A light that can't be grasped, can't be comprehended, but can be known in even the smallest act of kindness, compassion, friendship. Now, this is so critical that, and a lesson we learn that we are learning all the time, is how to pay loving attention. Needless to say, when we're distracted, we're only able to give those around us and ourselves a very small and distracted bit of our attention. And the practice, which we'll look at a little, and we will practice, disposes us towards the fullness of relationship and each other through gently weaning our attention off ourselves, weaning our attention off this constant stream of thoughts and feelings and distractions that we deal with as we practice. Because as we learn to become more attentive, as we learn to gather and focus our attention, a little bit like a spotlight, we're better able to see those around us without our preoccupations clouding the eye of our heart. We sit still and quietly in trust, trusting that even if we can't feel it, because it is happening so deep within us, quietly, imperceptibly, God is dissolving the barriers that we erect, which confine us within ourselves and hold us back from each other, hold us back from full relationship. So we are becoming more available for our life, for each other. This is what we're doing by bringing the whole of our attention to saying our word or short prayer phrase, silently, interiorly, with the flow of our breathing, gathering, focusing, stabilizing our attention. Progressively being released from the habit of chasing and running around and grabbing onto whatever happens to come onto the screen of our mind. We bring every thought into captivity and obedience to Christ. To take a phrase of St. Paul's in 2 Corinthians. And something I mentioned on a Saturday morning a few weeks ago was to think about Jesus' teaching of the gateway to the kingdom being narrow. Again, think of the way that we are collecting, gathering, focusing our attention. Think of that and think of this narrow gateway. Not a narrow gateway to exclude anyone. It's a wonderful teaching when it comes to prayer. No one is excluded. But if you think about this task of gathering and focusing, stabilizing our attention in front of this narrow gateway, as I like to say, so narrow that we have to, we can't even unpack our carefully packed spiritual suitcase, all the good things we might have put in there for the journey. We just have to throw that to one side. We have to release everything, all our preoccupations, our worries, our distractions. Off go the suitcases. In fact, according to medieval writers, off come our clothes. We go into this completely naked. We release all this in simple trust. And even more startling, in the trust that we don't even need to find the gateway. We just throw the baggage away. The gateway appears. Christ is the gateway, who has already found us from eternity. And just to repeat a wonderful little teaching by the Carmelite sister who writes under the pen name of Ruth Burrows. Again, for anyone interested, look at her book on the essence of prayer. Using a different metaphor, she says, we don't need to climb any ladder because God has come down to us. Relax. We release ourselves into our practice. We rest within our practice, trusting that God has everything in hand. That not only are we already at the gateway of love, the gateway of the kingdom of peace, but we're being helped through it. And of course, as you know, this calm focusing of our attention also helps us find such important peace from the frenetic activity of the surface mind, racing about as it does, from thought to thought to thought, from worry to worry to worry. But of course, allowing ourselves to rest, to release into God's peaceful embrace, can be difficult, particularly in difficult times. Again, I want to share a little anecdote of the last couple of months, which came out of a moving conversation with a head teacher. As many of you know, I've been doing regular workshops introducing the practice to head teachers across the country. And it was such a good comment from this much loved, much respected head teacher who has been working so hard for her young people, her colleagues, her community, who said at the end of a practice session, gosh, Chris, that was hard work. That was hard work, but there was a peace in it, and I know I need it. But I find it so hard to allow myself me time. So I asked if it would help not to think of these practice times of peace as me time. Although, what on earth is wrong with that? What is wrong with that when I know that she and all of us would certainly encourage others to look after themselves, but maybe not think of it as me time, but our time. And I'd like to remind you again of the witty, the amusing, but powerful, possibly accidental, but powerfully helpful comment by James Joyce in one of his short stories in The Dubliners about a character called Mr. Duffy, who he said lived a short distance from his body. Unpacking that with those very tired, very dedicated head teachers who laughed as soon as they heard that expression. How meditation helps us collecting our attention, focusing, gathering our attention, return to where we are, come back to where our body is, come back to the present, which of course is where we always are, and where God and everyone else happens to be. But not easy. Our fears, our ego, most often fear, causes us to rebel, to hold what we need away from ourselves. Despite that this is what our silent prayer needs, it's what it's all about. Resting in the Lord. Being quiet and letting the silence, as it were, speak to us and within us. Letting God take care of us. So I just want to underline again that the practice is really not so much about doing as about a process of profound release, a process of radical decluttering. So much so that we have to let go of any thought or concern about whether we are praying rightly or successfully at all. And remind ourselves that prayer is primarily what God does. Our prayer is always, in one way or another, merely collaborating with what God is doing. As Julian of Norwich said, God is the ground of our prayer. Our prayer is always no more than a response to what God is doing. Within the welcoming depths of God's love, there is nothing for us to do, really, except to consent to being there, to receiving. We don't need to struggle to be in any particular way. As we learn this, as we become more comfortable with this, I firmly believe that this understanding, this knowing, manifests in our relationships with others. We increasingly communicate to others through our words, our bearing, our silence, the quality of our listening. That others don't need to do anything in particular or be anything in particular to be deserving of love. As we continue with our practice, we are led to a more peaceful state of mind. And the early Christians, you might know, of the desert monastic tradition, spoke of this peaceful state of mind using the term apatheia. Apatheia from without, and pathos, suffering or passion, referring to a mind that is peaceful because it is less disturbed. Equanimity might be a good word to translate apatheia, but you might just simply call it peaceful mind. Peaceful mind is not about not having passions, afflictive emotions. It's not about not being human. It's not some sort of spiritualized version of sticking your head in the sand so you don't have to see anything and therefore react to it. It's actually precisely the opposite. It's a calm, heightened engagement. Peaceful mind is able to see others more clearly and respond because its eye has been decluttered. It can see when compassion, kindness, and friendship are needed. It's not about not being human. It's not about not having to contend with things. It's about having learnt to form an entirely new relationship with them that is more spacious. Jesus taught, as we all know, that it's difficult to see clearly, to remove a tiny splinter from someone's eye when we can't see clearly because of the log in our own. Again, it's a wonderful teaching about many things, but also decluttering. In our practice, which is so simple, but not easy, so simple, each time we become aware that our attention is grasped onto, latched onto, stuck onto a thought, we disengage our attention. We return it to our practice. We focus it. As we do this, we become increasingly skilled in observing how our grasping, sticky surface mind works. We become wise witnesses of what's going on. We become increasingly aware of the dynamics of our attachments and entanglements. What sets the grasping, chatting mind off? What buttons we have, what triggers us. But at the same time, through this very simple practice of disengaging when we're distracted and returning to our practice, we are cultivating a non-grasping, non-possessive quality of mind. We are entering the open, spacious country of peaceful mind, which isn't only a gift to us, a huge gift to us, but to everyone around us. Let me read you the last little quotation, the second quotation, which has been a guiding teaching for me again over the last year, from a book called Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives, The Teachings of Elder Thaddeus. He wrote, "If our thoughts are kind, peaceful, and quiet, turned only towards the good, then we influence ourselves and radiate peace all around us. In our family, the whole country, everywhere. When we labor in the fields of the Lord, we create harmony. Divine harmony, peace, and quiet spread everywhere." When we meditate, we commit ourselves to the quiet, steady work of cultivating loving attention so we can give it away. Even unintentionally. So it just radiates around us. We commit to the quiet, steady work of establishing this greater peace in ourselves so we can bring peace into the world, so that his loving light might flow through us, illuminating our life, flowing through us into the lives of those around us. Let's have some time of practice together. Let's allow ourselves to be still, to be quiet, to rest in God's ever-present presence, trusting we lack nothing, that we are loved beyond all measure. Make sure you're sitting comfortably. Try and sit as straight as you're able. Still, relaxed but alert. Take a couple of slow, deep breaths to begin to gather your attention, still yourself. take a prayer word or short phrase, and just say it silently, interiorly, with the in-breath and with the out-breath. Or just follow your breathing, sitting with a simple, loving intention, whatever works best for you. Whenever you notice your attention is chased and latched onto a thought or feeling, just gently disengage it and bring it back to your practice. That is the practice. It's not failure. It is the practice. You can't fail. God leads this practice. God leads all prayer. I'll strike a bell to begin, and again when it's time to finish. cultivation of loving attention, of establishing peace in ourselves through turning to God's peace. Whatever we can do makes a difference. Let's a little bit of light into our life and the lives of those around us. Thank you.